Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
So, Jacob, can I congratulate you? The surgeon was being mocked by Nurse Maria. Your long-awaited vacation has finally arrived. At least I'll get a break from you. But don't make a despot out of me, the doctor said angrily. As if you do not work well with me, I can even say you want you and cherished. And you waved Jacob. That's for prevention. The surgical nurse laughed. Or you'll like it so much on vacation that you won't want to go back to work. And then what are you gonna do? You're gonna start hounding me. Yeah, you'll be chased. You won't go for a word in your pocket. Jacob said with annoyance in his voice. You only have to say one word, and you say 10 in return. That's why you're lucky to have me. Maria did not stop. I'm the one who yells at others. But for you, I'll tear anyone apart like an asshole. That's how the surgeon got up from the table. We will celebrate my vacation today. He looked questioningly at the nurse. Or like last time, we're going to clink tea. Or I don't want anything strong. The woman grimaced. I have to work tomorrow. You're the one who'll be sunbathing on the beach, Maria. Frankly speaking, I don't want to go anywhere. Sadly, replied the surgeon. I would be at home in bed for these 5 days. If I don't have to, I wouldn't go anywhere. And as for drinking, let's just have a beer. I don't want wine either. I don't want to be on an airplane with a sore head. Let's do it, nurse. I'll just run to the store and get some Baltica. And after the surgery, you and I will have about an hour off before the end of the shift. We'll celebrate your vacation with you. Maria quickly packed up and went out to the store. Jacob took care of his paperwork and completely immersed in routine work. What's your vacation? Did he raise his bottle of beer? 4. Nurse at the end of the shift. May your vacation be amazing. I wish you take your mind off everything and enjoy life a little. Anyway, Jacob, here's to you. And here's wishing you don't miss me. He raised his bottle. 2 dark glasses clinked against each other, and the man and the woman closed their eyes, either from pleasure or from fatigue. Jacob was a hereditary doctor. His parents and their ancestors had been very careful to protect the legacy of their lineage, which originated from a single surgeon who had come to work. Jacob's great-great-grandfather was one of the best surgeons of the time. But the difficult political environment led to the fact that even the doctor's grandfather traveled frequently. But despite the difficult times, the family managed to maintain its continuity, which made it possible to continue not only family traditions, but also to educate professional doctors. From the very childhood, Jacob knew that he would be a surgeon. And it was not because his father, Ethan, who was a surgeon himself, insisted on it. It was as if the boy was born for this very purpose. He had never had a fear of blood, which is usually seen in children dogs with their paws tied up, cats with poisoning, and many other critters. This was for little Ethan, his real world, and he simply adored it. At school, the teenager now and then stopped the blood of his favorite classmates, or in the manifestation of sprains, when someone unluckily fell from a tree. Despite such a strange hobby, Ethan had many friends, and it sometimes embarrassed his parents. The latter always considered themselves true intellectuals, but their son was always socializing with the simplest people. Very often they had lunch and dinner with children from disadvantaged families. But when the guy entered medical school, everything in his life immediately changed. Time was barely enough for a little snack and sleep. So a lot of friends just drifted away. The only friend who still socialized with Ethan to this day was Max. He sat at the same desk with him for years in high school. Max went to Boston. Yes, he stayed there to work after graduation. He was an electronics engineer. Max would visit his parents in Chicago from time to time, and they would meet Ethan. The boy's parents thought that eventually their friendship would end. But to everyone's surprise, over the years it only became stronger. Therefore, each of them was aware of all the things that happened to each other. Jacob, despite his profession, was a sentimental and gentle person. He was very fond of poetry. He and his nurse Maria even had one interesting tradition. Before every operation, Jacob would recite a poem. Jacob was 32, and he was married to the beautiful Adriana. He had to spend a lot of effort to win her. The girl was completely unapproachable for the first few years. James was a longtime family friend and had 2 daughters. The first girl was from the first marriage, and in her there was nothing remarkable. But Adriana grew up to be more than just a beauty. She looked like a real model. Jacob was 4 years older than her. They hadn't seen much of Adriana growing up. Her father was a very rich man, so his daughters were rarely at home. But when Jacob met the girl on her birthday, he could not take his eyes off her. James decided to celebrate such an event at home. A lot of guests were invited. Among them was Ethan's family. Jacob was almost 24 at the time. He had 1 year of college and 2 years of graduate school left. Adriana had just returned from Europe, and the girl didn't want to stay at home. There were rumors that she had a boyfriend, but no one really knew about it. So Jacob wrote it off as gossip. The boy hadn't seen Adriana for a long time. Sometimes her older sister came to visit, but the girl herself had last seen Ethan about 5 years ago. "Oh my God," he exclaimed. "How beautiful is she?" Adriana is a goddess. Jacob kept his eyes on her the whole birthday. It was obvious that she didn't care about him at all. She was always talking to someone and laughing loudly. "Hello, Adriana." He came up to her. "Jacob, happy birthday. I wish you always remain as beautiful as a goddess." The girl looked at him with interest. She could not realize at first who it was. "Jacob, is it you?" She finally recognized the guy. "I'm sorry, I couldn't recognize you at first. You've changed a lot." You laughed too, Jacob. "How are you doing?" "What are you doing?" Thanks. I'm doing fine," the girl replied calmly. "My dad dragged me back, and I'm so used to USA. Did we have such a bad joke of a guy? What's there that isn't here?" "Everything," Adriana laughed. "After talking to Adriana, I began to think about her all the time. She stayed in the USA until the end of the summer, so we often visited them, went for walks with the girl." "What if you fell in love with a Russian guy?" he asked her once. "So what? What would I do with him?" She replied unhappily. "I would die of boredom with him. I need a real man, brave, courageous. I need him to be macho. You know what I mean?" "Not really." Jacob scratched his head. "How do you explain it?" "I like temperamental guys to get me," answered the girl. "I don't like it when guys get emotional. I like it when they risk something for me. Then I see my value. And the more risk I take, the more likely I am to fall in love with a guy like that. Isn't just saying I love you enough?" "I didn't understand, Jacob. You could write poems for the one you love. What's the point?" Adriana laughed. "Need action drive." That time Jacob did not understand what Adriana wanted from life, but that didn't make her any less attractive to him. He fell more and more in love with her. They spent a lot of time together. But the girl didn't seem to notice him. She kept talking about what kind of guy she would like. Maybe in this way Adriana was teasing Jacob, but the fact that she didn't like him and wasn't interested in him was obvious. The time was nearing the end of August. Jacob couldn't stand it and invited Adriana to take a walk around Chicago. They were walking, talking about nothing. The guy suddenly stopped Adriana. "I love you." Lowering his head, Jacob said, "Marry me." "Jacob, you what?" The girl laughed. "I don't want to offend you, but you're not my type at all." "What tastes can be when it comes to love?" he said in amazement. "Sorry, but I can never love you." Adriana replied with a smile. "Try to understand me." But Jacob, no matter how hard he tried, did not understand her. The girl flew to Europe again, leaving him with a broken heart. The guy hoped that in time he would forget her, but the passion for her only flared up. The next summer she flew back to her parents again. Jacob followed her around. "Jacob, what are you like a little child?" laughed at him girl. "I love you so much that I don't want to live. I told you many times you are not my type." That night, Jacob got drunk for the first time in his life. He was so hurt and unbearable that he drank too much. He remembered that he had gone, so to speak, to a showdown. But beyond that, his memory was a complete blank. The next day, he woke up in his house and remembered nothing. As Adriana told him afterwards, he didn't get to see her that day, but it was a good lesson for Ethan. The guy hadn't been drinking before. But after this incident, he didn't drink anything else except champagne and beer. And so ended the summer, and another year passed. Jacob had already told his parents that he was passionately in love with Adriana and that he could not imagine his life without her. "Jacob, I will talk to Sergei Nikolaevich," said Ethan. "Maybe he can influence his daughter. Because after the incident with Mom, he's going crazy." "What happened at Emily's?" the son asked in surprise. "She was seeing some guy secretly from her parents," sighed the father. "Her parents wouldn't let her marry him. So she got pregnant by him and had a baby. Now they've sent Emily to Europe. She's in Italy with the baby in their villa. Her parents are trying to marry her off to anyone to wash away the shame. So now the court may not even look at Adriana's wishes. They won't survive a second disgrace." "Wow," Jacob said in shock. "So Emily went against her parents. That's not like her at all." "Adriana is." "Yeah, that's right." "Maybe that hurts James more," Ethan said with annoyance. "She's always been a girl, calm and easygoing. But once she fell in love, she went against her father." "And who's the boy?" "Curious?" Jacob asked. "Did she introduce him to her parents?" "No," replied the father. "She only told her father that she had found her man, that he was a regular guy." Naturally, James didn't agree to that. "I understand him in some ways, though," the boy sighed. "I'm so in love with Adriana that I can't live without her. Maybe the same thing happened to her. Anyway, I'll talk to him," the man said calmly. "You see, Jacob, I think he would have agreed right away if it weren't for one thing." "You mean the money?" The son sighed. "They're very rich people. Being friends is one thing, but marrying your daughter to me is another." "Yes," Ethan said sadly. "His status might not allow it." And so it was. James had turned him down. He knew Jacob was a good guy, but he wanted a more promising husband for his daughter. So another year passed, and Jacob gave up altogether. The guy was finishing his residency and decided that he would never get married in his life. But suddenly circumstances changed dramatically. It was the end of May when James called his father and arranged to meet in person. "Ethan, I know you may not have understood me last time," he began. "I in no way meant to offend you or your son. But my status in society requires strict adherence to certain rules that I cannot break. In Europe, Adriana dated a guy for several years. He is the son of an immigrant from the USA who managed to get rich there. People there are not just rich, but in their circles famous. Sorry, I didn't tell you anything about that. Anyway, Adriana and this guy had a wedding scheduled for early May. Turns out he had another girlfriend. The guy's parents had cleared it with us. They really wanted Adriana to be their daughter-in-law. We even planned to pool our capital, but a week before the wedding, Adriana, or even the girl, found out and gave Mike a scandal. She also told his parents everything. Anyway, it all ended with him editing some obscure video and audio recordings. He slandered Adriana in front of everyone at the wedding and accused her of cheating. We left Europe in such disgrace that we still don't know what to do. If Jacob still loves Adriana, then we are ready to perform your wedding." Ethan looked at his friend in utter bewilderment. On the one hand, the man realized that this was not about friendship or love, but about profit for James. There was already whispering about him and his daughter in the USA, and it was hurting his reputation. On the other hand, Jacob still loved Adriana. The man was in a very difficult position. "James, I'm sorry, but I can't decide for myself." Finally, he said, "I need to consult with my son." "Yes, I understand." "I'll wait," James replied. "I'm just asking you to think it over." Adriana agreed to marry James, and just like that, fate took an unexpected turn. And Adriana married a surgeon from a poor but intelligent family. "I'll try to love you," Adriana said after the wedding. Then Jacob was ready to wait for her all his life, but time passed, and their relationship remained half friendly, half official. But Jacob still continued to believe that one day Adriana would be his not only body, but would love him with all her soul. The man hoped that things would change after the baby was born. He and his wife had been actively planning for a child for several years now, but so far everything had been unsuccessful. That's why Adriana suggested that during his vacation to change the environment and go to the sea to rest. Jacob was so tired at work. He would not have had the strength to fly further than Turkey. Adriana, of course, wanted to vacation on more prestigious beaches. But in the end, she and her husband agreed. Jacob, with your job, we cannot go anywhere at all, complained in the evening wife. Well, maybe that's enough. Why do you need this city hospital? Dad promised us a long time ago that if you open your own clinic, he'll help us. Adriana. Well, what am I going to do in this private clinic? Jacob was angry. I can't just sit around signing papers without surgery. No matter how hard it is, I love my job. I save people. I don't want to. There's no point in cutting off someone's cellulite or plumping up their lips with your experience and expertise. Would you be able to get rich like that already? Adriana was indignant. Good plastic surgeons make a lot of money. Adriana, is there something you're missing? Her husband looked at her sternly. Do you need anything? It's not that. She answered quickly. There's a difference between a doctor from a city hospital and a famous plastic surgeon. And my goal is to save people, not to disfigure them under obscure standards of beauty. Jacob said coldly, when will all this be banned? How much do these plastic doctors produce ugliness? Is what they do beautiful? It's just a tribute to fashion. It's like when they used to spoil teeth to make them ink, as on losing cheeks, hit with forces containing mercury. The point remains the same. People have to learn how to age naturally. Jesus, how old-fashioned are you? Adriana whispers, you don't know anything about fashion or beauty. Imagine, I had a baby and gained weight. And where do you think I should put all this fat? How many women suffer from such problems? You're the man who set these beauty standards. You wouldn't even look at me fat. You're right, but only partially side the man. Up to 30 years really looking for some ideal perfect form. But now I do not care what size clothes you wear. And imagine if I got really fat, what then? But I'd hate it if you were fat, she answered honestly. You see, you are not at all interested in my content. With annoyance in his voice, said Jacob. So it turns out that your attitude to me determines only the form. And what kind of person am I? This is for you a complete nonsense. Unfortunately, this topic was not finished that day, and I watched a lot of people on the beach. I mean, why did this woman come here to show off her body? Isn't it humiliating for her husband? The man watched carefully as one woman about 35 years old walked her body out. She was wearing an attractive swimsuit and was trying her best to prove to other people that she had a special figure. The stranger furtively caught the gazes of other men and enjoyed it. But here her husband was also standing nearby, preying on the younger ones with his eyes and breaking them with his gaze. What is this? Jacob was indignant to himself. Is that a family? Is there any love there? Each of them would cheat on the other if they could. He looked unhappily at Ada, who was posing in all her glory near the water. She was going in and out of the sea. Of course, Jacob knew somewhere inside that Adriana didn't love him, but he still hoped that one day she would want to look inside him and see what he was really like. The man shifted his gaze and an elderly couple came into his field of vision. The man and woman were in their early 70s, but they were holding hands like teenagers. The stranger had a rounder belly, but it was obvious that his companion was skinny, and the old woman was not embarrassed in the slightest. They kept looking into each other's eyes and smiled merrily. How pleasant to look at them, Jacob rejoiced. Nothing changed their love. No age, no decrepit bodies, no passionate glances around. How I wish Adriana could love me the same way. After a few days, Jacob finally calmed down and was able to enjoy life. The last 2 days had gone so well that the man even regretted the fact that they had to leave tomorrow. Hello, Max, dialed Jacob. Friend's number when they got home. I'm on vacation, so I can at least talk to you normally. I'm so glad to hear from you. I heard a happy voice. Listen, I'm gonna be at my parents' house in 2 days. Why don't we get together? I'm only going to be here for a couple of days, but I can't not meet you because I miss you so much. Jacob was looking forward to meeting his old friend. Finally, it was Thursday. Max, hey buddy. He hugged the man. How many years? How many winters? Hey buddy. Max hugged him. We haven't seen each other for almost a year, so tell me how you're doing. They liked to meet at their old cafe. This time they still had the same tradition. What business could there be? Jacob answered calmly. I have all the same things going on. It's the same scene, only sometimes the scenery changes. You have at least some variety. You have different operations, a friend said. And we have been sitting on our project for 3 years. We still cannot move. I am already sick of it, and I understand you, answered Jacob. It reminds me of the last years of studying at the Institute, knowing for sure that it will all end soon, but it all drags on and on without end. Sighed Max. I regret so much that I turned down an internship abroad then. You know Peter, who went to France instead of me and stayed. Sometimes he calls me and tells me they have such interesting things going on over there. There's a project in Africa or in Israel. He's almost seen the whole world. And I was afraid. How could I abandon my project in New York? So I was left with nothing. Max, no one knows what's best for you. His friend looked at him seriously. Maybe you wouldn't have succeeded in France. Or maybe it just wasn't your time to finish your project. Maybe something better will come up for you. Well, you're right about that, my friend smiled. If I'd gone to France, then this miracle wouldn't have happened. Betty is expecting a baby. Wow, the friend rejoiced. My God, how many years have you tried? How many protocols have you gone through? It's a miracle. I'm sorry, but I never said Max's head down before. We're 8 months pregnant with twins, boys. Tenta, let's grab a beer and toast to that, Jacob suggested. I'm so happy for you. What about you and Adriana? Max asked. You've already started planning. You know, we don't have any problems, neither she nor I, the man replied. She said herself that she would not have a baby until she was 27, and now she is 28. We started to try 2 years ago, but not persistently so that we could work on it for a year. We went to Turkey especially for this purpose, to change the situation. I am sure that you will succeed. Max supported him. Betty and I have been working hard for 10 years. We have spent so much effort and money, but it is worth it. You know, when I see our boys kicking their feet in the stomach, it makes my heart sink. Jacob, can you believe I'm a father? The news that Max and Betty were about to have twins inspired Jacob so much that he decided to talk to Adriana and ask her to take the matter more seriously. But there was 1 day left before the vacation was over. Jacob didn't want to do anything that day. He just lay on the couch and watched TV. Adriana had gone somewhere in the morning, so he just enjoyed his solitude. The man didn't want to think about anything. He was completely immersed in some nature program he was watching. He was so absorbed in the TV that he didn't notice his wife returning. Adriana was standing in front of the couch and was very nervous. Jacob, she called out to him, Jacob, I need to tell you something. The man looked at his wife's concerned face and turned off the television. What happened? He asked excitedly. Are you all pale? Jacob, I went to the doctor today. She started we're going to have a baby. You're pregnant? He said, Adriana in astonishment. We're having a baby. Oh my God, that's news. Jacob clutched his head. A real surprise. The next day, Jacob went to work. The fact that Adriana is expecting a baby so inspired him that the man just flew with happiness. Maria, is this for you? He handed his nurse a box of Turkish sweets. Can you get fat? I'll let you. Jacob, if I were 10 years younger, I'd never miss a guy like you. The nurse laughed. Thank you, darling, but be careful. The surgeon frowned playfully. You do not tell me such things. After all, I'm not only married now, but I'm going to be a father. Are you pregnant? In astonishment, said Maria. Wow, and congratulations from the bottom of my heart. Everything in Jacob, as if from the news, changed. He began to devote more time to his wife. Of course, it was impossible for him to spend a lot of time with her, but after work he tried to be with her every day. Not to say that Adriana was happy about it. The woman would have preferred to be alone more. Are you the one with the mood swings? Her husband told her. A very typical pregnancy condition. So be patient. If you feel like crying. But it's all business and in moderation. Don't get yourself worked up. I can imagine what will happen to me when Adriana starts sobbing like that. I'll have no one to care about then. It's not that bad, replied her husband. And not every pregnant woman has strong mood swings. Many just have morning sickness, and that's it. So let's not create problems for ourselves in advance. It's easy for you to say you're unhappy, said the wife. It's not like you're pregnant. You will not believe it, but I would with you to change places. Agreed, laughed the man. And Idle would lie around all day and from his work would rest. But unfortunately, only women give birth. All the grandparents were also very happy and were waiting impatiently for Adriana's belly to appear. The girl was very much annoyed by this, and lately she tried to stay at home and not go to her or Ethan's parents to visit. But that didn't stop them. So their parents themselves often traveled to their house to visit them. Jacob, I'm so sick of all these parties. One night my wife burst into tears. I just want to lie here and they're asking me what I ate today. How am I doing? Hell, I'll talk to your mom so they don't bother you so much. Jacob suggested it. You tell your mom that too, and say no hard feelings. But I don't want to see anyone right now. You're right. I'll call them, the girl replied. If I need to, I'll go to them myself, or I'll just get in the car to go somewhere and be alone. They're already here on the doorstep. So a month went by. Adriana never really started to get a strong COSA. Mostly her eating habits changed. She had a constant craving for hot pepper chips and snacks. At first, Jacob was in complete shock when she ate several packs a day of both. But after he consulted a good doctor, he calmed down. The main thing is that she's not throwing up or vomiting a lot, he said. Jacob, and this after the third, fourth month will pass, so let her eat. Despite the fact that the mood changed with supernatural speed, Jacob eventually got used to it. At times, the girl was simply unbearable. She often left home on the pretext that she needed to be alone. But none of this could not overshadow the joy of Ethan, and he was more and more tuned in to become a father. Max called a friend one day. How does it feel to be a father? To twins. You know, Jacob, I cannot tell you all this in one word, a friend said tiredly. It's not that there are pros and cons to everything. Just at first such euphoria, and then, when they do not sleep at night, and you, which at night already does not sleep, it is difficult to say. Of course you love your kids anyway. But I'll tell you honestly, for me the biggest problem is not that they scream, but that you can't even calm them down at night. I don't know how Betty handles them all by herself. I'm still in the euphoric stage, he sighed. Although Adriana has a terrible temper, and she's always getting on my nerves. But I'm very happy about her pregnancy. So you take advantage of the moment to be happy, laughed Max. And then when the baby is born, you won't know where you can get away from it. I'll tell you this, friend. If you feel that you have become a father, then everything else is like the sea. Well, if by the birth of the child you do not realize it, then it will be difficult to get along with it all. My Tanya had no problems during her pregnancy, and she was only on the ward once. Not as much stress. We got away with it all. But the kids were born so restless for some reason, and nobody knows why. Jacob was mentally prepared to be a father. He'd been setting himself up for it all along. Instead of nature and travel shows, he studied different seminars for future fathers, read medical books on family psychology. In general, he had no intention of backing down and was preparing for his new role with all the responsibility he could muster. A nurse asked him one day, "He's getting serious. No jokes? You don't tell funny stories, Maria, but I have to grow up sometime. Teacher's morals," he replied. "I'm preparing for fatherhood." "So what? You don't think you can laugh now?" The nurse laughed. "You're like a big baby, for God's sake." "Sometimes I can," he argued. "But how can I be an example to my child if I continue to be so unserious?" "You'd better laugh," the nurse smiled. "Otherwise your child will think from birth that it is not allowed to have fun and will grow up with some abnormalities." "Do you think you're in shock?" the doctor said. "I didn't think about it. It feels like you're pregnant, not your wife." Maria laughed. "You should have gotten yourself so worked up. You know, when I had my mumps, I had a real crush on my husband's jokes. He's a joker. As soon as he'd say something funny to me to distract me and make me laugh, I'd start crying. At first he couldn't understand what was wrong, and I couldn't explain it to him. On the contrary, he wants to cheer me up, but his jokes make me cry. Thank God, by the 5th month, my tantrums were over. Jack was born a healthy boy. He's 18 now and as humorous as his father. When they get together to laugh with them, you can sew, "Let's not have your morning face. I can't wait for Adriana to have the baby, and I'll run away from you before you do." "Yeah, who's going to let you go?" Jacob smiled. "I can't do without you here. So don't even think that you and I will be carried out of here." He laughed. "That's the same thing." Maria supported him. "Now it's different. And I thought that I already began to lose my Jasoba." From that day, Jacob began to treat his wife's pregnancy as easier, and it became easier for him. About 3 weeks later, the head doctor called them all together. It was a big meeting. There were a lot of questions. We had to solve something with the new equipment. It was scheduled to arrive next week. The Ministry of Health had come up with some new innovations. We had to put them into circulation. All in all, it was a tough day. There were no scheduled surgeries until this afternoon. And no emergencies yet. Jacob and his colleague David were discussing something in his office. Maria made them tea, so they'll send someone from the department to get the new equipment up and running. The nurse asked with interest, "Or do we have to guess how it works?" "That's the thing," David sighed. "They were supposed to send Ethan and me for training, but because of the lack of money, we're going to have to figure it out on our own. It's like kindergarten, for God's sake." Jacob scolded, as if we were playing in a sandbox. "And what if this machine during the operation will stop or somewhere their switches? And we don't know about it." "They don't have any brains in there, or they don't care," answered his colleague. "They are all theorists there. Do you think in this Ministry of Health anyone like you and me stood at the operating table for so many hours? So you cannot even count on their understanding. All right, but it's not far from malpractice." The doctor couldn't calm down. "I've got a baby on the way, and I can't even deal with this gang." "Well, we'll deal with it ourselves." David said tiredly, "You heard what the chief said. They'll send us detailed instructions along with the equipment." He swore like hell. "We've been waiting so many years for a new machine. And now, when it arrives, we won't know what to do with it. Actually, it should be brought by an engineer and some doctor who is already using it." A nurse intervened. "You know, Maria, they don't owe us anything," sighed the elderly surgeon. "Their duty is to demand from us and meet the deadlines they set. It's the same thing every time. Once a surgeon becomes chief of surgery, after a couple of months, he forgets what kind of workload is there. How hard it is for us to meet all their deadlines. He's been suffering from it himself and wanted to leave. Instead of the previous one, now he's becoming a tyrant himself." David was finishing his tea when Ethan's phone rang. A text came in. The man reached into his pocket and opened some kind of video. After a few minutes, he turned pale. A video and 3 pictures came to his phone with his wife in them. Jacob ran out of the office. "No, it can't be." "Pale lips," he said. "This is some kind of setup." The man was no professional, but he thought both the photos and the video were believable. As the photos showed Adriana with some man having intimacy at their villa. Jacob could not understand how he should react to all this. Was it all true, or had it all been set up for some purpose? He was in complete prostration for a few minutes, but then it came to him from the deepest depths that he urgently needed to go to the cottage. David, out of breath, ran into the office. "I'm asking you to cover for me. I need to leave urgently. I'm in trouble. Did something happen to Adriana?" The doctor said excitedly. "She fell." That's all Jacob could manage to say. "I'll work for you later. Maria, stay with David." The nurse and the doctor gave the man a concerned look. He was very nervous and not himself. "If I go in a straight line now, it will take me about 40 minutes, Jacob told himself. "Shouldn't I call her first? Maybe someone had set this up on purpose." He stopped. He was torn in different directions. On the one hand, he wanted to call. On the other hand, he wanted to check it out. Well, let's say it's all a lie. Jacob started the car. Then I'll go to the cottage and find no one. Then I'll start to find out what it was. But if Jacob's heart seemed to go through that thought, the man's heart began to pound frantically. "But if it's true, and she is there, I'll catch her in the act," he whispered, wiping lines of cold sweat from his face. All the way he was trying to find out if she was cheating on him with someone else or not. His brain was just exploding at the thought. But other than this video and pictures, he had no proof, which meant it could all be a lie. Jacob. He had performed many difficult surgeries in his life. But what happened to him then was his greatest challenge. He had never experienced such fear. The man decided to leave his car at the beginning of the street so that no one would recognize him. He had to walk another 500 meters. He walked cautiously, looking around. He felt like he was a criminal. God, when am I going to get there? Nervous, he said to himself. This all seems like bullshit. He turned onto his street and was simply stunned. His wife's car was parked outside their house. Jacob stood like a stumbling block and could not move further feet softer. He almost fell. The man sat down on some bench outside the house he was standing next to. He felt like his heart was going to jump out. I must find out the truth, he said to himself, and slowly got up from the bench and walked towards the cottage. Jacob cautiously crept up to the fence. The gate was locked. The windows on the first floor were for what arena, and nothing could be seen. The man strode around the back. The neighboring villa was long abandoned. He crept slowly up from the garden side. 1 foot caught, and he could barely keep his balance. Finally, Jacob was outside the house. He slowly turned the handle of the small door that led from the small shed into the house. Taking off his shoes on his socks, he walked down the hallway. The door to the living room on the first floor was open. Jacob pressed himself against the wall and crawled sideways along it. The closer he got, the clearer some sounds became. Finally, he began to recognize voices. Adriana, well, will you stop playing games? The man said grudgingly. We've been hiding from everyone for so many years. It's been almost a year since I got divorced. Sweetheart. But now, until I give birth to a child, I cannot tell her anything or her. The man heard his wife's voice. You think I'm not tired of all this? If it hadn't been for my father, I wouldn't have married him at all. But after Europe, he didn't want to wait, you see. It all hit him hard, and he had to rebuild his reputation. So I went into marriage with Ethan. Do you know how much I regret it? Well, what are you going to tell him now? The stranger sighed. I mean, you're pregnant. I don't know, Kevin. Adriana answered. That's why I'm asking you to wait. Maybe in time something will change. I love you, the man replied. I can't live without you anymore. Neither can I. She kissed him. Be patient for a while. I'll think of something. Jacob at first wanted to fly into the room and tear it all down, but then he changed his mind. He left the house as carefully as he came in. He climbed over the back of the neighboring cottage and blinked stealthily to the beginning of the street. At that moment, Jacob did not want to think about anything. He only wanted to scream at the top of his voice. The pain stiffened his heart as well, so that it became difficult for him to breathe. What kind of a fool was I? He finally burst into tears, getting into his car. After all, she never loved me. I had made it all up, but why? Does it make me feel better that she lied to me all those years? On the contrary, I'm in unbearable pain right now. Jacob drove and drove. He didn't know which direction to go. He just wanted to drive into some foggy place, disappear forever. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening when the man began to regain consciousness. He was very thirsty. His stomach was sticking out a lot. He stopped the car and got out to stretch his legs. Looked at the navigator. Jacob had driven almost 200 kilometers. Oh God, where am I? He looked around. I don't even know these places. After hitting the waters a bit, the man sat down in his seat. The door to the car was open. The evening brought a bit of a chill. So it's all true, and I can't deny it, he said loudly. I wondered what I should do with this truth. Jacob clutched his head and sat like that for a while. But no matter how hard it was for him, he had to make a decision. Now the question arises, whose child is it, mine or his? The man thought, what am I supposed to do with all this? I can't live with myself after this, that's for sure. No matter how much I love her. It just doesn't make any sense, because she doesn't love me, to tell me everything that happened today and right now or to wait for the right moment. It's not like I can play it off like nothing happened. The man stepped out and wandered toward the field. The evening grass filled his lungs with freshness and coolness. For a while, Jacob even forgot where he was and what had happened to him. But he brought it back quickly. I need to wait for a while. Jacob decided. Maybe I can find out whose baby it is. Then all these issues will be easier to deal with. If it's Kevin's, then the divorce will be painless. But if it's my child, then her parents will get on my nerves, maybe even threaten me. So I need to buy some time to learn about everything and have arguments on my hands. Then her father will have nothing to say to me. I'll keep the video and the photos. And then the man turned pale. Until that moment, the thought of who it could be had never even crossed his mind. But then who knows that Adriana has a lover? Shocked, he said, "Who sent me all those pictures?" Jacob quickly ran to the car, picked up his phone, dialed the number from which the video and photos had come, but it was blocked. Naturally, no one would send such photos to the police from his personal number. The man said with annoyance in his voice, "But if you think about it, who could it be? Probably one of my employees." "Yeah, no one at my workplace has ever seen Adriana. Only Maria, and that's on a photo taken on a cell phone. And no one knows about our cottage. Well, they know we have one. But I've never told anyone the exact address. With work, I guess it's all a dead end. Nobody here cares much about me. Then maybe it's just one person taking revenge. Maybe Kevin's not her first man. Then it's very likely that he's been following her and knows where our villa is and when she and her lover go there. I don't have any other options yet. It looks like Adriana's revenge, and I'm the bargaining chip in this whole thing. But maybe it's for the best. It's not a question of how many men she had while we were married. It's the fact that she didn't love me, and if I continue to pursue this line now, that man in the photo will not rest. He's gonna look at my reaction now, and then he's gonna send me more proof, because he's going to have to prove to me that Adriana really cheated on me. Yeah, the best thing for me to do in this situation is to wait." Despite the fact that Jacob regained some composure, the man was in a lot of pain. He was well aware that after what he had seen, he would no longer be able to hide his anger. Jacob made up a story that he had some serious problems at work, so he did not want to see anyone anytime soon. The man was on his way home. It was getting late when his phone rang. "Jacob, where are you? Did you hear Adriana's voice? It's 10 o'clock. "Yes, we had a serious problem at work." "It's cold," he answered. "I'll be there in about an hour." "Hell, I'm sorry, but I don't want to see anyone right now," he added and disconnected the phone. He was afraid that if he continued to talk to his wife, he wouldn't be able to stand it and would tell her everything. He would never know the truth. Finally, the familiar scenery flashed outside the window. Jacob pulled into Chicago. The closer he got to the house, the more he shuddered. Because of her pregnancy, Adriana slept in her room. And that, for Ethan, was a good thing. He realized that he would have to make a great effort not to give himself away. And to do that, he needed to see Adriana as little as possible right now. The car pulled into the courtyard. Jacob almost collapsed outside the house from fatigue and overexertion. He gathered all his strength and went inside the house. Everywhere was dark, and the man realized that his wife was already asleep. "Well, thank God," he muttered. "And tomorrow I'll get up for work, and she won't see me. And now she's up late." Despite his hunger, Jacob went straight to his bedroom. He didn't even have the energy to think, so he immediately fell into sleep. It was almost 7 o'clock a.m. when Jacob woke up. He walked into the kitchen. The servants were not there yet. Had a coffee and a sandwich and got his things. Went to the hospital. Maria hadn't arrived yet, and to distract himself, Jacob started filling out patient files. "How did you suddenly say someone's voice behind his back?" "Jacob, are you okay?" Concerned asked the nurse, seeing the pale face of the surgeon. "Is something wrong?" "Maria, yes, everything is fine." Barely pronounced sleep. "It's okay. I was so nervous. And I was up all night with her too. But the main thing is that everything is all right," stroked on the shoulder of the surgeon. "Maria, are you going to be able to work today?" He tried to smile. "David won't be able to fill in for me all the time." "Well, that's true," confirmed the nurse. "Although yesterday he and I rested most of the day. We had one open fracture and a shattered head with a concussion." "Well, that's good. I was getting worried that David had gotten a kick out of me yesterday," Jacob replied. It must be your bad luck, she laughed. How's your shift going? We're in trouble. Anna Sergeyevna James was the second daughter of a famous rich man. As a girl, she grew up willful and capricious. From childhood, she pulled the whole blanket on herself, because the family formed the opinion that all her needs and desires must be fulfilled. Father, by the way, was not against it. He was impressed by her inexhaustible energy and desire to live. Adriana could sometimes behave recklessly, for which from time to time got into some unpleasant stories. Her passion was not only movement, learning something new, but also the attention of other people. It became a real drug for the girl. Adriana went crazy when people bowed before her, when they ran after her, when they could not live without her. When the girl studied in Europe, she learned to manipulate people quite well. So many guys who went crazy about her were dizzy. The girl herself was just playing with them. That's how it was with Mike at first. He was the son of very rich parents, and as it turned out, he was spoiled even more than Adriana. The girl had heard about him for a long time and wanted to get to know him better. Naturally, she was not particularly interested in simple guys on such. She just practiced her seduction skills. But for marriage, the girl considered only a guy from a very rich family, Mike. She had already seen him several times before she met him, and she liked him. The guy was really good. When they first met at a party, Adriana did her best to attract Mike to her, and she succeeded. The guy quickly became interested in her. 2 weeks later, they started dating. Adriana first tried to reform Mike. He was irresponsible, and the relationship was never serious. But then his father and mother got involved. They liked the idea that Adriana could marry Mike, so his father had a very serious talk with the guy. Adriana and the guy dated for almost 3 years when the wedding date was set, but she always knew that he had someone on the side all the time. Before the wedding, the girl gave him an ultimatum. Mike wasn't used to that kind of thing. He turned out to be a pretty violent and vindictive guy. Mike, you have to realize that your free relationship is over. Adriana said to the guy, you're gonna get married soon, and you're gonna have a family. Adriana, you don't have to tell me how to live my life. He looked at her angrily. I decide how I want to live my life. If you don't like it, get out. Are you out of your mind? The girl got angry. I'll tell your father everything. Let's see how you sing when he takes everything away from you. Don't cross me. He stared intently into her eyes. I won't spare you, Adriana. Don't play games with me. We'll see about that. Furious, she shouted. I'll talk to your parents. I think you have a lot to lose, so you'll listen to them. Mike was not used to being told what he should do. Even his parents couldn't influence him. But the guy realized that Adriana could blackmail him and make his parents take everything away from him for a while until he changed. His parents were on her side. All right, Adriana, I'll show you how fast I got rid of you, clenched his fists. After their conversation, the guy did just that. At the wedding, Adriana and her parents were completely embarrassed. Her father was just freaking out at the time. He really didn't know what to do, as circles on the water quickly spread rumors that Adriana, the daughter of one of the richest people, turned out to be an ordinary wench. Father was going crazy in those days. The only thing he could see was to marry off his daughter urgently. Of course, from his circle, no one would have agreed to such a thing back then. So they had to find a decent family for Adriana's temporary marriage, so to speak. At the time, it didn't matter who it was. He had a few guys in mind, but Adriana chose the son of an old surgeon Ethan knew. Adriana, I don't care, he told his wife. The important thing is that he marries Adriana officially now, and then we'll look for a suitable match for her. James, but we are taking such a risk, the wife replied. What if they have children? Then no one will marry a decent family. That's what you'll do with her, replied the man. Though you all will tell you what doctor to visit and how to protect her from unwanted pregnancy. Lucy, I want to solve all this in a year. 2 at the most, no more. Adriana's wedding was modest. There were only her parents and a few other acquaintances from Jacob's side of the family. It had happened so fast that not Max, Ethan's friend, not Emily and Adriana's sister could make it. You could tell it was a private ceremony. A year later, Adriana's parents had already found the right person for her, Kevin was the son of a banker. Their fortune was estimated only much less than James's. The guy had married an ordinary Italian woman a few years ago. He had studied in Italy for 5 years, and when it came time to play the wedding to the girl his parents had picked up for him, he found himself already married. His parents gave him a huge scandal and even disowned him. This Kevin did not embarrass Kevin in the slightest, and he continued to live his life. In Italy, he worked so that he had no problems with the maintenance of his family. One day, the Kevins were visiting James and told him about how their son lives now. "It's such a shame. Such shame," through tears, Kevin's mother said. "We still can't get over it. Maybe you should introduce him to a nice girl." Lucy mother Adriana came up with an amazing idea. "Maybe he'll like her and forget about your Italian, Kevin." "Where are we going to find one of those?" sighed the boy's father. "And all the nice unmarried girls will wait for him, won't they? Now we have to run after him and woo him to make him forget his Italian. You know, Liam, we have Adriana living with that surgeon too." Through tears, said James. "It was such a mistake to marry her off to a simple man. It's been a year now, and my girl is just dying, I told her after Europe. And my daughter, wait, your man will come along." And she wanted to take revenge on Mike and married the first man she met. You know how my heart aches for her. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my daughter. She's already so sorry. She wants her surgeons to divorce her. She says if I could find a good guy who could love me, I'd leave my husband Jacob right away. "Yes, you're in the same trouble," sighed Mrs. Kavina. "Why didn't our children meet before? Maybe then they would have found their happiness in each other. Or maybe it's not too late," cautiously said Lucy. "We're going to Italy to our villa in a month. We could invite Kevin to stay with us." "That's not a bad idea," his eyes sparkled. "Why don't you bring your daughter? Let them get to know each other." Everything was ready to leave for Italy. James called his daughter Adriana to him. "This is your chance." He looked at her sternly. "You didn't miss it. Kevin is the son of very wealthy people, and being related to a banker will be good for us. I can do business with him." "Dad, all right." My daughter looked at him. "Let's say we like each other. Then what am I supposed to do with Ethan? What about your daughter? What could be the problem with him?" The man laughed. "We'll file for divorce right away. If Ethan makes any claims against me, I'll give him money. That'll keep him quiet, especially after he stopped practicing because of his illness. That kind of money will do him good." James was from the village, but the race for more money had changed him so much that he had forgotten that he had once been such a simple fellow. Now he saw himself as an overlord who could make or buy anyone. Ethan and his son were just things he had used, and now he could throw away. So in Italy, Kevin's first meeting with Adriana had been a success. At least that's how it seemed to the girl's young father. "It's strange," Kevin thought. "I don't know them, and they talk to me like I was a good friend. Maybe their father sent them." After the first meeting, he was impressed, not by Adriana, but by everything that had happened. James asked him to go with them to Sicily for a weekend, and he agreed. He had only been there once before. He wanted to visit those places again. Adriana said, breathing in the air of Sicily, "How beautiful it is here. Kevin, I even envy you. Can you come here every weekend?" "It's not that simple, Adriana," he objected. "I have to work. That's why I don't always have enough time or money to travel. We rent a place in the Dominican Republic. We don't have our own place yet. Doesn't your father help you?" "Watch out," asked the girl. "Uncle Liam, as far as I know, is a rich man." "Yes, he has a lot of money," sighed the boy. "But I don't need it. I chose my own happiness. My parents didn't support me in that. And I understand you," Adriana replied with annoyance in her voice. "I was in the same situation. When I got married to a simple surgeon, my parents stopped talking to me. I was just torn and metal. But as time went on, I realized they were right. Ethan and I are so different that I'm just unhappy with him. And you're okay with that life?" "No," but Kevin looked at her. "I love the Dominican Republic. I don't care what my parents think. It is difficult, of course, to live on my own after a fully provided for life, but I am coping so far." That day they visited the most beautiful places in Sicily, swooning in the sea. And she was all right. A thought flashed through Kevin's mind. What am I talking about? He quickly stopped himself. But after that day, the James family with Kevin became a good tradition to go somewhere on the weekend. The Russians spent exactly 1 month at their villa. James, thank you very much for the communication, for our meetings. The guy shook the man's hand in farewell. I was very glad to meet you. Mutually, Igor hugged him. James, you turned out to be a good guy. I don't know why your parents are so upset with you. I wouldn't let a son like that go anywhere. The James family. They so unobtrusively got into Kevin's soul that after they left, the guy couldn't come to his senses for a long time. He felt like he was missing something. A few weeks passed, and he decided to give James Nikolaevich a call. Igor, hello. James rejoiced. I'm so glad to hear from you. How are you doing? How is Italy? Everything is fine, answered the guy. And how are you doing? How's it going? We are doing well so far, thank God, replied the man. Adriana is suffering though. If you want, I'll give you her phone number. Maybe she'll talk to you. We were so happy that our girl in Italy came back to life, but as soon as we got home, she is again always alone and won't let anyone near her. Well, okay, Kevin replied. Maybe I cheered her up a little. The guy didn't even notice that he had tied a noose around his neck. Talking to Adriana on the phone made her even more attractive, and when Adriana flew to the villa, the next thing you know, they were having an affair. The girl got everything she dreamed of. Kevin was really after her. He took risks. Adriana became an object of adoration for him. For about a year, the girl flew to Italy every 2 or 3 months. But Kevin was not going to divorce his Italian wife yet. James realized that he just had to bide his time. After a year and a half, Kevin filed divorce papers. Adriana hoped that in a couple of months, she would already be able to divorce Ethan and marry Kevin. But Dominika went on principle and created a lot of problems for Kevin. Therefore, they divorced with scandals and constant lawsuits. It took almost 2 years. Finally, all the documents were received, and Kevin could return to his family. His parents lived in New York, and he left Italy to continue his father's business. Kevin's child was madly happy that their son finally understood everything and made the right choice in his life. When Kevin came to New York, he and Adriana found it easier to see each other. He started coming to Chicago often. Sometimes he and Adriana would meet at her parents' house. But most of all, they preferred the privacy of their villa. It was the old Villa James that her father had given to his daughter for her wedding. Therefore, Adriana felt at home there. The girl found out that she was pregnant weeks before she and her husband went to Turkey. So she set everything up. So she and Ethan made everything work out. While on vacation, her husband didn't count the days much, so he went along with everything right away. It was impossible to tell that Adriana and Kevin were planning a baby. It looked as if it had happened by accident. But the girl knew for sure that the baby was from him with Ethan. She had been on birth control pills for all the years, so she couldn't get pregnant with him. Adriana realized that now she would have to deal with the Ethan issue, and her father had already insisted on it. But she had her own reason for delaying the divorce, which neither of them knew. James was born and raised in a small village. He came from a poor family. As a teenager, he fell in love with a neighbor girl, Katya. Therefore, when the guy was 20 years old, his choice was already determined. It must be said that James was a young man with great ambitions. In the village, he did not want to stay. And after the wedding, he and Kate immediately moved to the city. The first years of life in the city were very difficult for them. James got a job as a laborer in the road service and quickly mastered the work of road machines. The boy realized that this industry can be a bottomless one. Old roads are being repaired and new ones are being built all the time. So he rented a roller and grader and hired a few guys. After a year, he was already able to buy back his equipment. After a couple more years, he had his own road construction company. This could stop and live well, but the ambitious guy wanted to go even further. He invested all his money in an engineering plant. 10 years later, James, aged 35, became the owner of one of the largest road construction equipment factories in the world. Perhaps he was lucky in life, Perhaps it was his inflexibility that helped him, but he did get his way, and everything would have gone on as it was if Kate hadn't died. Their first daughter was born when Kate was almost 28 years old. Their life was full of stress, so they could not have children earlier. After the birth of their daughter, the girl could not recover for a long time, and a year later she was diagnosed with cancer. James what only did not do, but to save his wife he never managed. It cannot be said that the young man was heartbroken. Sure, he grieved for a while, but James became so addicted to money that it became for him the only goal in life. It was almost 2 years later when he began to think about getting married. His little daughter Emily was under the care of a governess all the time. In this, the man knew no problems, but he wanted to have a solid status in society, and his condition as a widower did not help him in any way. Even then, James began to think about a girl from a rich family. "I've already reached such horizons that I don't need a wire anymore," he told himself, looking in the mirror. "I've worked so hard to get to a position in society that I'm not going to fall for any romance." James once at a call at a nobleman's party, he said that he was going to marry and was looking for a suitable candidate. Naturally, the girl had to be from a rich family, well-bred, educated. The rumor reached William's house. He had a daughter named Lucy, but she was so spoiled that her parents had been unable to marry her for nearly 7 years. The girl's temper was simply unbearable. "Lucy, listen to me," the father said to his daughter. "This is your last chance. Do what you want, but this James forget." Here's another crossed her arms on her chest girl. "I don't need this redneck. Then I'll marry you off tomorrow to the first man I see." In a rage, said the man, "You understand me, and you will get nothing more from us." Lucy saw that her father was not joking and was very frightened with her demands. To stay with some beggar on the street for her was tantamount to death. The girl repeated for several more days, but her father did not give up his position. Then Lucy tried to manipulate her mother. "Don't even think that I will ask your father for you." Coldly, she replied, "You've gotten on our nerves so much that I'll be the first. Who's going to kick you out of the house?" "Mom, but he has a daughter." I tried to find the right argument. "You didn't want the guys we offered you all those years ago," my mother said angrily. "They didn't have any children. Now you have to solve this problem yourself." The acquaintances organized a dinner, or rather, a viewing for James and Lucy. The girl tried to restrain her arrogance. She herself realized that at her age, and she was already 28, it's not easy to find a guy who matches her needs. You could say it was an official marriage of convenience. It was a big wedding. The father was so happy to finally get rid of his daughter that he spared no money for the wedding. At first, Lucy thought that Emily would be a big problem for her. But to her happiness, the girl grew up very calm. She lent herself well to the education of her nannies. Yes, and James, her husband, did not spend much time with his daughter. His new wife didn't see the girl as much. At this stage, things were going well for Lucy. She didn't have to make a scene when her husband spent too much time with her daughter. But as Emily began to grow older, she, like any teenager, began to show interest in all areas of life. When Adriana Lucy was born, they immediately separated her from her older sister. Therefore, strange as it may sound, the children did not see each other that often. When Adriana was 8 years old, she had her first scandal. Emily and her toys were playing in the garden. The girl ran up to her, started throwing her toys around the sides of the llama Bee doll's hands. "What are you doing?" Shocked, shouted Emily. "Why are you breaking my dolls?" "Yours," laughed 8-year-old Adriana. "Nothing here is yours. Everything here is mine. Get out of here. This is my house too," protested her sister. "Give me my dolls. Leave me alone." "Ah, so evil," shouted Adriana. "Are you gonna get it now?" She started yelling with all her might. It felt like she was being cut. After 5 minutes, the mother came running, and "Daughter, what happened?" She asked worriedly and looked angrily at Emily. "She took my dolls and started breaking them," screamed the girl, "and then she hit me." "Are you out of your mind?" Furious, said Lucy. "Go to your room. I won't let you play in the garden anymore." That evening, there was a scandal between husband and wife. Lucy did not want to give up her position. "Wherever you want her and take her," she shouted. "But she won't be in our house anymore." Lucy, she's my daughter. James replied sternly. No need to throw words around. Okay, then Adriana and I will leave this house today. Calmly replied his wife. In a few days I will send you the divorce papers. All right, the husband got angry. I will send Emily to a boarding house in Italy. James finally gave in. After the daughter from her first marriage was expelled from the house, Adriana became a real mistress there. The first time Emily was able to be at home was not until she was 16. The father invited his daughter home for summer vacation, so she showed up. Adriana greeted her. No one was expecting you here. I came to see my father, not you. I tried to talk some sense into my little sister Emily, so don't let it bother you. But Adriana couldn't accept it. Every day she thought of something to do. The girl would put the ice cream on the chair, locked her door so she couldn't get out, threw a fly or a spider in her plate. Adriana, when are you going to calm down? Emily once said to her, don't you realize I don't need any of this? You can have this house and your father's wealth. You're the one who doesn't understand me, she shouted angrily. I just hate you. I would be the happiest person in the world if I could see you dead now. At your funeral, I would have laughed for a very long time. Why did Adriana hate Emily so much? She didn't know. But she sensed some inner strength in her sister, and it hurt her deeply. Adriana had always known that she was really a coward. She was a worthless girl. Adriana would never be able to survive without her father and his money. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to be able to adapt to everything. No other country frightened her. Not like at the boarding house, where the children were treated very strictly. Adriana had always felt that compared to her older sister, she looked like a pacifier. That was probably one of the reasons why the girl wanted adoration. In the back of her mind, she was afraid that any guy would choose Emily over her. After that visit, Emily did not appear at her father's house for a long time. Yes, and the girl entered the institute and all her attention focused on her studies. Even though Adriana had already studied in Europe and her father's house no longer attracted her. But on her sister's 20th birthday, her father insisted that his eldest daughter came to her birthday party. Adriana resisted this for a long time. She even argued with her father, but he did not change his decision. Let them finally establish a normal relationship with each other, her father thought. Adriana had changed a little during this time. She stopped feeling so much aggression towards her sister. In the first place, everyone confirmed that the girl was much prettier than Emily. In the second place, all the numerous fans of Adriana, whom she had broken her heart in Europe, gave her some self-confidence. Hello, sister. She greeted Emily snidely. I hope you're not here for long. And I'm glad to see you, Adriana calmly replied Emily. Unfortunately, I can only stay here for a few days. We have a summer internship at the institute. I can't miss it. That's good, Adriana said cheerfully. I think I'll put up with you for a few days. There were a lot of people at Adriana's birthday party. Her mother wanted to show everyone how much her daughter had grown up. Emily sat alone, far away from everyone. She didn't know any of the guests. Suddenly, she saw Ethan's familiar face. She said excitedly, How happy am I to see you? And this must be Jacob. Don't you remember me? You and I together tied the bloody paw of one dog. Emily said in amazement, Honestly, you've changed a lot. How are you doing? I hear you are studying in Italy. The girl and the boy talked about something for a long time. They reminisced about their childhood and the few times they had met together. Emily was very sweet and open. Jacob hadn't expected that from her. At all. Emily's father didn't talk about her much. All his hopes and plans were connected with Adriana. Suddenly, the host appeared on the stage, and the party began. A few minutes later, the birthday girl came up to him as well. God was amazed. Boy, this Adriana. Yeah, she's a real hottie. Emily wanted to continue the conversation with Ethan, but it was as if he wasn't listening to her anymore. All his attention was absorbed by Adriana. The girl saw how he approached her and told her something admiringly. A few days later, Jacob showed up at their yard. Jacob, hello. She ran out to meet him. Emily, you're coming to visit us. Where is Adriana? The guy asked the girl. She's at home. I'd like to take her for a walk. Is she on the phone with someone at home? Answered Emily. Let's go have some lemonade and talk about something. She took her guest by the hand. They were laughing merrily when Adriana appeared on the terrace. She had a very displeased look on her face. But seeing how happy Emily was, the girl decided to take advantage of the situation. Jacob, why don't we go for a ride together? She laughed. Come on, hurry up, take my hand and let's go. The guest wanted to say something to Emily, but Adriana pulled him forward so much that he had to look under his feet not to fall. Good boy, Jacob, Emily thought. Why is Adriana doing all this? After all, she's going to play with him and leave him. The next day, Emily flew to Italy. The girl did not notice that she began to think about her acquaintance all the time. Jacob seemed to her that guy about whom only one can dream. She felt care and inner strength and tenderness in him. They liked the way he recited poetry. He had a sensitive nature. Adriana could never understand such a man. She favored brute external force. She liked to control and manipulate people. Emily realized that neither her father nor her mother would go through with the marriage. As much as Jacob loved Ode, and it brought the girl relief. The next summer, the girl decided to fly home for a visit. Adriana was there at the same time. God, but you could not at least wait until the end of August. Adriana greeted her sister unhappily. You've ruined my summer. Don't worry, I won't be here for long. She greeted her sister. That evening, Jacob arrived at their house. Emily happily ran out to meet him. Jacob, hello. How happy am I to see you? Rejoiced girl. How are you doing? Hi, Emily. Smiling, he replied. I did not know that you came. I'm fine. How are you? Well, Jacob, let's go. Adriana deliberately interrupted their conversation. We have no time to waste. Jacob wanted to talk to his mother some more, but excused himself and went after her sister. They returned from their walk. A few hours later, Jacob was very upset. And even on the contrary, Adriana was smiling all the time. Why all this circus? Strictly looked at her sister at her. If you don't have any feelings for Jacob, why are you making a dog out of him? What's it to you? Her sister laughed into her eyes. Or are you jealous of me? Jacob is a good guy, Emily argued. He has a pure and vulnerable soul. You're picking on him on purpose, aren't you? Why are you so angry? Adriana said coldly. What do you care about him? Jacob deserves better than you. Calmly replied the girl. What is angry, sister? Are you saying that I don't deserve him? And who is worthy of you? She laughed hysterically. Jesus. I think I'm beginning to realize you've fallen in love with him. Of course, you couldn't have expected anything better. Emily could only fall in love with some surgeon. Yes, I love Jacob, Emily said confidently and made a fatal mistake. All right, let's see if he chooses you. Adriana replied snidely. I'll even bet he'll always run after me like a dog. Did you realize that? Get out of here. I hate you so much. Emily wanted to fly to Italy the same day, but the tickets were gone. She was wandering down the street when Ethan's car came around the corner. Emily, he stopped his car. I want to tell her to her face. I love her. Do you understand that? Jacob, are you drunk? The girl asked in fright. Come on, let's go home. Emily quickly got into the front seat and tried to get Jacob to turn the car around. If you want to talk to Adriana, we need to turn around. Trying to slyly take it, she did. Let me show you. Once we get there, I'll take you straight to her. Yes, you will help me behind the flying tongue, replied the boy. I beg you, help me, I can't live without her. They had almost reached Ethan's house when he turned the other way and stopped the car in a wooded area. It was already dark outside. Adriana, I came up to you, Jacob and your daughter. I love you so much. Come to me, darling. The guy embraced Emily and began to kiss her passionately. The girl at first wanted to break out of his embrace, but then realized that perhaps she would never see him again. I'd rather be with someone I love once in my life than with someone I don't love, she whispered. An hour later, Emily got behind the wheel and brought Jacob home. She took him out of the car and sat him on a bench near the yard. The girl knocked loudly on the gate several times and hid behind a bush of a neighbor's house. Ethan went outside and saw a drunk Jacob. Jacob said, his father in shock. Are you drunk? That's what I'm talking about, son. Come on, let's go. Emily got home late. She was overwhelmed with such happiness. She didn't want to see a single face at home, so the girl came home already at midnight. And the next day at 7 o'clock, a cab was waiting for her and took her to the airport in New York. As soon as Emily found out that she was pregnant, she immediately told her father. It made no sense to her to hide it. Emily, why have you embarrassed me like this? James lamented. What am I going to tell people now? You will, she replied calmly. My daughter fell in love with a simple boy, and I wouldn't let her marry him. What an asshole. Lucy Vladimirovna was angry. How can you be so ungrateful, Jamesa? Stop babysitting her. I demand that you forbid her to come home. Let her stay in her Italy. Despite what happened to Mom, James didn't wish his daughter harm. But he did what his wife said. They were forbidden to come to the USA. Her father gave her a villa in Italy for the first time, and her mother took a sabbatical at the Institute and finished it when Sophia was born. The father helped his daughter financially all this time. A year later, Emily learned that Adriana was marrying Jacob. The girl was very hurt by this, but she realized that the guy needed time to see who Adriana really was. At their wedding, naturally, she was not present. Emily felt that no one but Ethan held any interest in her. She transferred all her love for him to their baby girl, Sophia. A year passed after Adriana returned to the USA and got married. Suddenly, Emily's father informed her that they were all flying to Italy together. The girl did not know why, but she got a bad feeling from this news. Everyone arrived at the villa. Emily did not really want to communicate with her relatives, so she and her daughter tried to go somewhere for a while. And everyone looked coldly at the girl. Emily, we have an important guest tomorrow. Her father once told her, I'd like to ask you not to interfere in our affairs. I don't care at all. Dryly, she replied, I don't have to be there at all. No, you must be present. Father replied sternly, and remember, you're divorced. Your rich husband left you for a mistress. At first, the girl couldn't understand what it all meant. But after the meeting with the important guest, everything began to fall into place. My God, are they marrying Adriana to Kevin? Horrified, she thought. Emily hadn't been on all of their trips. But before they flew back, she did approach her father. Dad, what's this all about? She asked him bluntly. Are you imposing on Adriana, Kevin? Emily, but you are a grown woman and should realize that Jacob is not suitable for us. Father answered calmly. He has already fulfilled his role, and I am very grateful to him for that. But it's time for Adriana to look for a better husband. Kevin's parents are very rich, and he has connections. The father looked at his daughter. Is that any way to play with people? Jacob, he's not a toy. He's not a thing. That's no way to treat people. Do you understand that? Emily, not crossing the line. James looked at her angrily. You're talking to me, girl, who's with some beggar. Just for the fun of it. Don't piss me off, or you and your freaks will stay on the street. Don't call Sophia that. The daughter answered boldly. Thank God, Mom didn't live to see what a monster you've turned into. I don't want anything from you. I give you exactly 3 years. Her father approached her in a rage, so that not you, not this one, would be in my life. You understand me. In 3 years, you leave my villa. Emily was in shock from the conversation with her father. She couldn't believe he could have changed so much. Everything human in him seemed to have died. There was nothing to hold on to. If I am no longer your daughter, the girl sobbed, I don't have a father anymore. As soon as I finish university, I will leave here at once. During the next year, Adriana constantly flew to Italy and lived in a villa with her lover. During this time, Emily and her daughter only spent the night there. Finally, the girl could be put in daycare, and Emily returned not only to the institute, but also began to work. The girl studied to be an architect. After she learned that Kevin divorced his wife and moved to the USA, Emily became very worried. The girl was most afraid for Jacob. Her father had stopped feeling compassion for people, and she was afraid that he might do Jacob some harm. Almost a year passed, and she finally decided to come to the USA. Emily and her daughter looked at the old, shabby houses. It was her only possession. The house had belonged to her mother's parents long ago. When they died, her father deeded it to Emily. It's a wonderful home. You and I, the woman, hunt her 4-year-old daughter. Sophia, do you feel okay with the accent? The little girl said. Emily finally received her diploma, and now she had to decide what to do next. She wanted to talk to Ethan right away and tell him everything about his daughter, Adriana's lovers, and the fact that he was just being used. But even before she left, she got a call from a woman who had worked as a maid in the house for many years and who loved Emily like a daughter. Aunt Vanessa told her that Adriana was pregnant. The woman realized that there were a lot of unknowns in this whole story. The last time Adriana flew to the villa, a very unpleasant conversation took place between them. Adriana, why are you doing this to Ethan? He loves you. Emily started the conversation. You know, if it wasn't for you, I would have left him a long time ago. She laughed, just the joy of being hurt. Making me put up with him for so many years. You think I don't know Sophia is his daughter? She looks exactly like him. You thought if you slept with him, he'd be yours. But it didn't work out. You couldn't get back at me. You ended up losing everything. I'm going to drag it out until the end so I know how much you're suffering. Don't expect me to let him go so easily. You're probably dreaming that I'll divorce him, and he'll finally be yours. Adriana, Jacob, not a thing. Her older sister looked at her sternly. If I wanted him, I would have gotten him a long time ago. I have the most important trump card on my hands. If anything, Ethan and I have a child together. And once again, Emily's candor became her fatal mistake. Adriana had been thinking of ways to get Kevin pregnant ever since, but to make Jacob always think the child was his. So even when she divorces him, he will come to see the baby. And then Adriana can play with it over and over again. It took her almost a year to do it. The father was very angry. What's the matter? He said, we're all set to get married to Kevin. Dad, I need a little more time to deal with Ethan. Adriana replied. But after she got pregnant, her parents couldn't wait any longer. It was decided that if Adriana wouldn't tell, then James would then talk to Ethan's father and tell him everything in 2 months. The only problem was whether or not to say who Adriana had a child with. Where are you going with this? Adriana was angry with her father. You're ruining my business. No one really knew what it was all about. After the failed wedding in Europe, she had such a chance to take revenge on her sister that the girl was just glad. She didn't necessarily have to marry Jacob. Her father had picked other temporary options by then, but Adriana had insisted on him. Emily didn't have any particular plan. She just wanted to tell the truth. Jacob. But she knew she needed proof for this conversation. Her Aunt Vanessa had told her that Kevin had visited them often. It was clear from their conversations with Adriana that they liked to go to their old summer house. Before coming to the USA, Emily had talked to her good Italian friend Andrea. He did all sorts of video, communications, and hardware. So he told them at the time that detectives are not needed now. You just put bugs in and you're all set. In New York, the woman met a man who promised them to her. So all that was left was to arrive at the cottage without anyone noticing her and set it all up. Bye. It was a little hard to go to such things with her daughter. So she left her daughter at Aunt Vanessa's for one evening. Not bad at architecture, she quickly found the right place and discreetly set up a mini camera. Emily and her daughter lived in the village in the old house for the time being. Finally, after a few days on her laptop, the woman saw what was happening at Villa. She quickly cut a small video and took pictures using a SIM card she had bought in the USA. The woman sent everything to the right address. Ethan and Emily found the phone number easily. She called the hospital and made up a story that Jacob had asked her to call her back urgently, but his number wasn't answering. In this story, Emily was undergoing surgery. At first, no one wanted to reveal such information, but when the woman burst into tears, the nurse on duty could not stand it. It had been 3 days now, and Jacob just couldn't find a place to go. He wanted so badly to tell his wife everything, but he had a feeling that Anonymous would show up again. If it wasn't for the surgeries he had to focus on Man, it seemed like he would have lost his mind. But there was a great benefit to having some time to himself. Jacob went back over and over again and tried to figure out why he had gotten all this obsession. He reasoned about why he was attracted to them in the first place. He could see clearly now that she and he had always been radically different. He occasionally read some books, especially poetry, and watched informative movies, but his wife spent her days mindlessly. She seemed to have no purpose at all. Naturally, Adriana didn't work anywhere, but there was basically nothing to talk to her about. She never wanted to discuss serious topics. I don't even know why I married her. Finishing the operation, thought the surgeon, even after I found out she was pregnant. Adriana has absolutely no maternal feelings. She has always been interested only in her life. She's just obsessed with herself, and basically she's empty inside. God, I can't believe I never noticed that before. There's nothing inside her. It's like a pretty, shiny wrapper covering up an empty candy bar. At first, it seems like there's bound to be a lot of value behind such a fanatic. But there's nothing there, nothing at all. That day, Ethan had a major turning point in his life. He realized that he had no love for Adriana and never had. She had simply shifted her gaze to his dream, and he believed it. In fact, they were so different that there had never been any point to their relationship. Even if she's carrying my child, the man told himself, I'll divorce her anyway. Adriana, as the dream of the perfect woman for me, was dead forever. I wanted to be deceived. Now I'm reaping the result. Thank God it all happened now and not when I'm 50 years old, and nobody will need me anymore. After all, somewhere there is my woman who will not only love me, but will be able to see me. Jacob was very reluctant to go home. Maria had already left, and he had stayed on the pretext of finishing his business. He rested his head on his hands and settled on his desk. He was about to fall into sleep when he heard distinctive sounds, grudgingly pulled out his phone. We need to meet tonight at 8 at the Faro Cafe. I sent you pictures of your wife. So he showed up after all, as I thought, said the doctor. All right, let's meet. Let's see what else you can tell me. Jacob left the hospital. He didn't want to be late. 7:45. He was already there. Hello, Jacob, said someone above his head. How are you doing? Emily? He said in astonishment. What are you doing here? Didn't expect to see you here. Yeah, I have a very important work meeting. I'm sorry, we can meet later and talk. The man looked at the girl carefully. The facial features looked familiar to him. Oh shit, he cursed. If Emily leaves, I won't see her again. And I'd really like to talk to her. So be it. Emily, wait. He jumped up and ran after the woman. Honestly, I'm so happy to see you. What about your meeting? She smiled. Can we meet another day? No, Emily, do I need you now? Unexpectedly, Jacob said. Emily, my family is falling apart, or rather, has already fallen apart. Adriana has a lover. How did you know that? She asked with interest. Did she tell you that? No, Jacob lowered his head. Someone sent me photos and videos of her with him at our villa. They were there. Well, anyway, you understand, Jacob, it was, I said calmly to Emily. The man didn't understand what she meant at first. He wanted her to explain it to him, but then it came to him. Emily did. You're in shock, he pronounced. But why? Jacob, I've loved you for years. The woman was embarrassed, but Adriana went on principle. She always hated me. She always felt like someone might have chosen me over her. It didn't just hurt her. It drove her crazy. So she knew about it all along. The man said with pale lips. Yes, Emily replied. She played you on purpose to hurt me. And when her wedding in Europe broke up, she took the opportunity to psychologically kill me. Jacob, her father could have chosen someone else for her at that point. They only needed you for a couple years to shut her down and embarrass her back. Her father was going to marry her off to someone else anyway. So he only asked father then because they needed the right man at that moment. The doctor paled for a while. They were planning to use me from the beginning and then throw me away, the woman said sadly, and they found a replacement very quickly. In Italy, she seduced a guy who was the son of rich people. Or rather, as I understand it, they all planned it together. Kevin was married to an Italian woman at the time, and his parents disowned him for it. Things worked out with Adriana, and about a year ago, he finally got a divorce. Jacob, his and Adriana's wedding had been planned for a long time. God, I'm such a fool. The doctor's head in his hands. I naively believed in their good intentions. I had hoped to the end that Adriana would accept me. But why didn't she file for divorce right away? She had her own personal reasons. Emily replied and stroked her daughter's head. I would never have gotten involved in any of this. And I apologize to you, Jacob, but Jacob, do you remember the day you got drunk and came over? Oh, and I was really drunk then. The man sighed. The only thing I remember is getting in the car, and that was it. I had a fight with myself that day, the interviewee began, but I couldn't fly out that night because there were no tickets. I was wandering down the street by the courtyard. Suddenly, I saw your car and stopped you. I realized you were drunk. You were going with Adriana to confront her. You were going to tell her everything. By some miracle, I talked you down, and we drove to your house. But at one point you stopped and started hitting on me. We got out of the car. You thought I was Adriana. I tried to get away from you, but you caught me, Jacob. I did it on my own. It was a conscious decision because I loved you. Are you saying that there was something between us? I don't believe my ears, the doctor interjected. Yes, she replied shortly, and I have proof. I can even show it to you. What kind of proof? In shock, asked Jacob. He was making an effort to believe all this. Sophia put her arm around the girl. Your daughter Ethan Candle became dizzy from overexertion and began to faint. Jacob slapped the women on his cheeks. Jacob, wake up. The doctor opened his eyes. Standing in front of him was an agitated Emily. Sophia was looking intently into his eyes. I'm sorry, it was probably too much even for me. Coming to his senses, the man said, God, I have a daughter. Who would have thought it? He whispered. Jacob, what's pregnant with Kevin? Emily finished her story. She said that you would always think it was your child, even when you divorced her. So she needed time for you to get used to the role. But what was all that for? Screamed the doctor. I'm beginning to think she's mentally disturbed. Maybe, replied Emily calmly. She wished I'd never gotten you. In her dreams, you were supposed to chase her around like a dog. And it didn't matter that she had another husband now. You were supposed to remain loyal to her to the end and grateful for your supposed child. Jacob Ethan realized that he needed to be alone and process all of this. He had said goodbye to his mother then, without understanding why, but he wanted very much to take the girl in his arms and kiss her. But he restrained his impulse. For several days, Jacob woke up. Finally, the whole mosaic came together and he was able to decide what to do next. After work, he took his wife and they drove to her father's house. Jacob, what's the matter? Adriana protested. Couldn't this wait until tomorrow? No, he answered briefly. I've waited too long as it is. They pulled up in front of the big house. Jacob asked everyone to gather in the living room. James looked at him unhappily. So let's begin. Spoke calmly to his son-in-law. Let's probably go from the very end. And carries a child by another man. The father and his wife turned pale. He realized that nothing more could be hidden. Soon you will perform the wedding of your daughter Adriana to Kevin, with whom she is pregnant, the doctor continued. You, James, never wanted me to marry Adriana. But when trouble came to you, you just used me as a staging post. God judge you for that. And now you. Adriana. He looked at his wife. This is the last day we'll be together. Tomorrow I'll divorce you. But for all the suffering you've caused Emily, don't expect to find happiness. You're incapable of love. And there will be someone who will treat you the way you've treated me and everyone else. And I'll tell you honestly, if you hadn't gotten involved, we might be happy together by now. I know Sophia is my daughter. For the first time in her life, Adriana didn't know what to say to her. Everything Jacob had said was true. Her war that she had set up with them had so consumed her entire life that she had no chance of winning from the start. There was complete silence in the living room. There was no point in lying or denying it. And if you try to smear me in any way or make up any sordid stories, James, I'm talking to you personally. I have footage of your daughter frolicking in our villa with her lover. That will be all. I do hope our paths never cross again. The man ran out of his father-in-law's house and went to his house. His mind was racing. But Jacob realized that he needed to get some sleep. He took a sleeping pill and fell asleep immediately. The next day, when he came home from work, his ex-wife's things were gone. What a petty idiot James is, Jacob said in shock, looking at the fact that the furniture in his mind had been removed. He must be getting back at me. Let him take everything. I'll still have the walls. And they're mine. I bought this house with my own money. He can't take it away from me. The next day was supposed to be his day off. He jumped back in the car, set the navigator, and followed its instructions. It must have been about 3 hours when he finally saw the name he wanted. "Where is the old house of Kate's parents?" James' ex-wife asked Jacob, sitting behind the yard of the old man. "Yes, on the next street over." He looked curiously at the stranger and showed him his hand. Jacob stopped his car where his grandfather told him someone ran out of the house. "Daddy is here," Sophia shouted joyfully. "Daddy, I love you so much, and I love you." He picked the girl up in his arms and started kissing her. "God, how have I missed you all this time? I always felt inside that you existed." "Jacob, hi. I'm outside. But how are you doing?" She smiled. "Now I'm doing well." Looked Jacob, the woman intently in the eyes. "Now I have a real family, and I will not let you or Sophia go anywhere else."